So after 16 weeks of being in John's Gospel, I thought before we start to unpack that, we might just go, can you remember the reason why John wrote his Gospel in the first place? We've talked about it numerous times over the last 16 weeks. It all comes down to this idea in John chapter 20:31. John chapter 20, here we go. We'll get on the right page. There it is. John chapter 20:31, when John wrote that he wrote these things down so that we might believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and in doing so that we might have life in his name. So we've read a large chunk of the Gospel of John. I hope that this has happened, that through reading the Gospel of John, we may have been able to reaffirm that Jesus is indeed the Messiah and that we found some level of life through this message. That's what last weekend was about, wasn't it? We had some amazing services here last weekend where we focused on the love poured out to us. So on the Good Friday, we looked at the cross, and on Easter Sunday, how love was stronger than death. And we saw that through the resurrection of Jesus. Now, I forgot to mention this on Easter Sunday, so I better do it now. I do thank the artists for our artwork up the front. So we've got Amy for the L, Quibby for the O, Liz for the V, and Sue for... Did I get that wrong? I'm pretty sure I've got that right. And Sue for the E, I think. But anyway, that's just amazing work that retells the Easter story up there. And hopefully that through last weekend, we have had that experience of love. We've had that experience of love. But now we're in sort of this in-between stage. Jesus has risen and has come back to the disciples, but things have not quite gone back to normal as such. Because Jesus isn't hanging around for a long time in any one place. He's sort of popping in, visiting people, and then popping back out again. Like he visits Mary in the garden, but doesn't stay there. He visits Cleopas and his friend on the road to Emmaus, but leaves when the bread's broken. He pops in and sees the disciples on Easter Sunday night in the room, locked room, but once again leaves after eating fish. He's not hanging around a lot. Now the disciples have headed up to Galilee, where they were told to go, and are waiting to see Jesus again. And Peter, being not a good waiter, says, "I'm going out fishing," and goes out fishing. And others go with him, and as you heard Daniel read, they catch nothing after all night. But it's in this moment that Jesus decides, all right, now's another good time to pop in and to visit the disciples. And he steps in, and we're told that this is the third time that the disciples have seen Jesus since he was resurrected. My question, why? Why now? Why this event on the beach? Did Jesus go, you know what, this is a good time to go and visit the disciples again? What is it about appearing on the side of a lake and giving fishing advice that somehow Jesus is going, this will be helpful for the disciples? Why the miracle of the massive catch? What was the point of that? Why did Jesus ask the disciples for fish when they came to shore, when he already had fish on the fire cooking? What's the point of providing breakfast for them? See the questions I'm sort of asking? It's a significant story in the Gospel of John after the resurrection, but I guess I just want us to ponder a little bit of why. What's the point behind this? Why do you think Jesus chose breakfast on the beach as one of these special moments to reappear after the resurrection? And what might the disciples needed from Jesus at that point, that Jesus is going, I'm going to do this for them? What do they need at that point? You understand the questions? This is one of those moments I'm going to get you to talk to the people around you. I'm going to give you about 2 minutes or so. I'd love for you just to chat with each other. There's no right or wrong answers here. What do you think? What do you think of those two questions? I'll put on the sound of the seaside again and call you back in 2 minutes. Thoughts about why do you think he chose a breakfast on the beach, or why do you think that what did the disciples need? You got an idea? Or are you just stretching?
I think the disciples needed help because they had a really bad night fishing and they hadn't caught anything, so I assume they must have been pretty hungry as well.
Yes, they needed help. And I think it's interesting on that point that it's almost like Jesus saying, just because things are a bit different now with the death and resurrection, I'm still here to help. That hasn't changed because Jesus helped beforehand, and I don't think that changes afterhand too. Good point. Anyone else? Bill.
This is a bit prosaic, but because they were there, they'd all gathered there into one place, and that was the place to meet them.
Yes, so Jesus came to where we were, where the disciples were. So they just happened to be fishing, so that's where Jesus met them. Yeah?
I think it was the same sort of environment as the Sermon on the Mount. So it's referring back to the miraculous feeding of people.
Yeah. There is some links here. And you want to mention that?
Well, Karen and I, the links we were talking about was the fish and the loaves, and the net and walking on water, and the beach was where he called his first disciples.
That is the exact one I was just about to mention. Luke chapter 5 is almost the identical story. And the interesting part of Luke chapter 5 and John chapter 21 is, remember how we said that sometimes John mucks around with the chronological order? You could explain it like that. John just puts it at the end. Or you could explain it, this actually happened twice. And it's almost referring back to other things to remind the people who were there that A, Jesus truly is the Messiah, but B, remember when. Remember when I called you right back at the beginning? We were on a beach the same way. You couldn't catch any fish back then either. And I helped you then. And I asked you to follow me then. And I'm still doing that now. Yes, there are links that some commentators would want you to do, suggest that Jesus is trying to help the disciples remember back to other events. Any other ideas? I just got to move back up to the thing because I've got two other points that I'm trying to remember. Breakfast on the beach and providing for his friends is something who is Jesus anyway. But I also had down here, maybe he's giving them a taste of what the future ministry of them is about. Helping people, being hospitable to people, gathering people together in community and showing them love. Maybe. There is one part of the reading that I absolutely love. It's that part when they're having the realization on the boat, oh my goodness, that's Jesus again on the beach. You know, I don't know how long the periods of time of Jesus popping in and popping out are happening, but at this point they're going, that's Jesus. And John says to Peter, that's Jesus, and I love Peter's reaction. What does he do? Dives into the water and swims. The boat is not fast enough. I need to get back to Jesus. I'm going. Peter doesn't wait to sort of go, all right, what should I be doing here? How do I respond to Jesus? He just wants to be close to Jesus, so much so that he's willing to swim the rest of the way just to get close to Jesus. So many of us would have heard that passage before. Many of us would have had probably some sermons preached on that before. But I still want to ask the question, what is happening here? What is happening here? Jesus asked Peter 3 times, "Do you love me?" Why? 3 times Jesus says, "Feed my sheep." What is he meaning by that? And there's that strange moment when Peter wants to go, "But what about him? What about him? What about John?" Jesus follows up with those amazing words, "Follow me." So I do have some questions here. Can we get to the next part, or my thing's not moving on? Oh, all of that is frozen. I should just look behind here, sorry. So there's my questions for you. I told you there was some second discussion. This is it. So 3 times Jesus says, "Do you love me?" How do we understand that? Second one is, what does feed my sheep mean, either to Peter or to us? And lastly, why do you think Jesus ends twice with the line, "Follow me"? Why is that important for Jesus to be saying to Peter? I'm going to give you another 2 or 3 minutes. I hope it was not too bad chatting with the people around you last time. Let's have another go at this. Okay, how do we go with that? I know that you've heard sermons on this before, so you would have ideas. Any ideas on any of those 3 questions? Why did Jesus say 3 times, "Do you love me"? What does "feed my sheep" mean? And why would Jesus say, "Follow me"? And I'm going to follow this up with a question. "Follow me" is traditionally said at the beginning of the discipleship journey. If you understand the culture at the time, you started your discipleship journey when someone said, "Follow me." This is not the start of the journey. So why is Jesus saying it again now? What do you want to say?
Feed my sheep because Jesus and God are the shepherds and we are the sheep.
Yes. So Jesus is saying to Peter, help look after the church. Yeah, good answer. Sorry, I'm prioritising.
I'm doing feed the sheep because I think that it's like that Jesus is telling Peter to go out and share it with people, and basically he's the shepherd and he's sharing it with the sheep.
Yes, and if you actually keep reading, Peter does do that job. Peter becomes one of the main leaders in the early church. So you're 100% right here. Did I see hands up the back?
I think it's a case where Jesus is saying at the beginning of his ministry, "Follow me." His ministry is finished, in a sense, so he's bookending it by saying, "Follow me."
Yes. Yes.
Feeding is associated with food, obviously, and sustenance, and that's something we need every day. It's not like we just have a one hit in our commitment, but we need continuous input and nurture and so on, feeding.
That there is a significant spiritual component to feed my sheep. Yes, definitely. Did I see a hand up here somewhere? I thought Oh, there's one in the middle there.
This is partly also to do with the first part, but the disciples have gone back to their old ways. And Jesus has rocked up and turned around and said, "Actually, no, I've called you to a new calling. Come and feed my sheep."
That's interesting. I didn't have that one on my notes up the front there. that they've gone back to their old ways, and Jesus reminding them of the new calling that they've got. Just running over here.
Okay, so the 3 times is because Peter denied him 3 times. The "feed my sheep" is obvious call to leadership. And "follow me" because Peter ends up being crucified. Shares the the same death that Jesus died.
That's interesting, yes. Any other comments before I give mine? Thank you so much for sharing. I'm a big believer that God speaks through all people, not just the person standing at the front. But yes, on one level, most commentators would say this part, there's a direct link back to, as Bill just said, Peter denying Jesus 3 times, and Jesus gently encouraging Peter to address that by asking the question 3 times, do you love me? They would even go as far as to say the setting is similar. Where did Peter deny Jesus? Around a fire. And now they're around another fire trying to work through this. But notice that Jesus doesn't shame Peter here, that Jesus doesn't condemn Peter or humiliate him in front of the others. Rather, he shows grace to Peter. More than grace, he offers to restore Peter. Jesus doesn't simply say, Peter, you're forgiven, but rather says, I've still got a place for you. You still got a role in the ministry and the mission that is continuing. Feed my sheep. Feed my sheep. I just think it's a beautiful part of the story that Jesus doesn't let Peter get stuck in his failure, but rather say, no, that's then, this is now, let's keep moving forward together. I'm really interested in that last phrase, that follow me one. As I said, it's powerful at the beginning because when Jesus says to Peter, follow me, that's that sense of, we're starting this journey together. But this is at the end of the gospel, not at the start. So what's happening here? But it's almost like Jesus is saying, the resurrection is not the end of the journey here. The journey continues on, and you're still called to follow me. The call is still the same. And maybe that's the word for us today too, that the Christian life is not just about believing that Jesus is alive. It's about continuing to follow Jesus, continuing to trust, continuing to love as Jesus has loved, continuing to care for other people and places where Jesus calls us to show care. I guess my question, how are we going with that? Don't worry, I'm not going to get you to talk to each other about that one. But how are we going with that? Many of us will probably say, oh, I'm not perfect, but I'm not going bad either. Like, I'm going okay. We're not openly denying Jesus like Peter did. We're not as bad as Peter. We're not making catastrophic mistakes. We're just going okay. Perhaps the message that this story is stirring within us this morning is that Jesus wants us to go a little bit deeper. Jesus is pushing Peter, and maybe Jesus is pushing us as well. Not just to love a little, but to love a lot. Jesus is looking for a love that leads to action, a love that serves, a love that feeds the sheep, a love that stands for justice, a love that makes a real difference. You know, I'm not going to be too critical of Peter. Peter's impulsive, and yes, he mucked up. But that moment on the beach with Peter and Jesus changed Peter's life. Something happened there that shaped the rest of his life. And as we've acknowledged, Peter became bold and passionate and faithful, became one of the key leaders of the early church. He gave himself wholeheartedly to continuing the work of Jesus. I find it interesting that the Gospel of John that we've spent, 16 weeks on, John just didn't write John. He wrote 4 other books in the Bible as well. Can you remember what they are? John 1, John 2 and John 3 are 3 of them. But he also wrote the book of Revelation, right near the end of his life, he had some visions from God and he wrote them down, and that became the book of Revelation. And I wonder whether John thought about Peter a lot. They were not only good friends, but I think that they were different personalities and they learnt off each other. And there is one part of Revelation where John wrote down these words from Jesus, and he's writing them to the church of Laodicea, and he wrote this. He said, "I know your deeds." This is writing to a church. "They are neither cold nor hot. I wish that they were one or the other. Because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I'm going to spit you out of my mouth." Like, that's pretty confronting and tough imagery there. But the point I think that John / Jesus, whoever is speaking at this point, is trying to make is not to crush people and say, "You guys are terrible," but rather to say, "I love you too much to let you drift into indifference. I want you to do this passionately and wholeheartedly, not settle for a lukewarm faith. I want you to try to make a difference." And if we're going to continue Jesus' ministry of love in this world, if we're going to feed the sheep and tend to their wounds and care for people and bring hope and show compassion and speak the truth and live faithfully, then I don't think we can settle for indifference either. I think we need to find that wholeheartedness that Peter found. How do we do that? How do we make sure our faith doesn't go lukewarm? How do we recover the passion if it's faded? I don't think it's doing things more in our own strength. Peter couldn't do that. Peter drew close to Jesus. That's what the answer was for Peter. To open ourselves up to Jesus just like Peter did. To let Jesus encourage us and build us up just like Jesus did with Peter. Just after John wrote those words about being lukewarm in Revelation 3, he wrote just 2 verses later, he wrote these. Once again, these are coming from Jesus' words. "It is because I love you that I correct you and challenge you. So be diligent and turn from your indifference. Here I am. I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with them and they with me." We know that verse 20, don't we? Do you hear verse 19 as well? That sense of don't settle for indifference. I'm here, ready to help. Jesus once again wants to share a meal in these verses, just like he did with the disciples on the beach. Once again, Jesus wants closeness. And once again, Jesus doesn't come to condemn, but to invite. Invite us to be part of his continuing ministry of love. Which is probably why Jesus says at the very end of that passage from John 21, "Follow me." Why Jesus says at the very end of the Gospel of John, "Follow me." So today perhaps our invitation is simple, to open the door again, to come close again, and to receive grace again. The question is, do you love me? Then feed my sheep. Do you love me? Then follow me.